In Blue Lock, the formula for creating the world's best striker is clear: ego, ambition, and obsession to be the best. But then there's Nagi Seishiro, a guy who enters the project with no real drive of his own and instead coasts on his natural talent. You'd expect someone like this to get exposed and have their soccer career cut short, right? Wrong. Not only does Nagi survive in this cutthroat environment, but he excels. Climbing up the ladder and being ranked as one of the best players in Blue Lock, Nagi has certainly lived up to his genius moniker. But for as far as his talents has carried him, that alone is not enough. In fact, at this point in the manga, many fans consider Nagi to be failing. Why? Because for all of his natural abilities, he's still missing the one thing that Blue Lock demands above all else: a sense of self. And until Nagi can find his own true ego, he'll never succeed on his own terms. From the start, Nagi has lived a life without ambition. Despite being enrolled into a prestigious school, he had no real desire to excel in anything. All he wanted was a simple, laid-back life where he could coast by without any effort. But all of that changed when he met Ryo Mikage. Unlike Nagi, Ryo had ambition in spades. As a wealthy heir who always got everything he desired, Ryo saw Nagi as a rare treasure that he must obtain. But more importantly, Ryo saw a way to achieve his dream of winning the World Cup. And so, Ryo introduced Nagi to soccer, setting him on his journey to Blue Lock. For the first time in his life, Nagi had a reason to try. Not because he suddenly cared about soccer, but because for the first time, someone took an interest in a slacker like him. Yet, while Ryo was the one to set Nagi onto this path, it's important to note that Nagi was still coasting. His journey into Blue Lock wasn't motivated by any desire to become the world's best striker, it was just another path of least resistance. Multiple times, Nagi wanted to quit and go home, and if it weren't for Ryo constantly pushing him forward, he would have gladly done so. And yet, despite his lack of drive, Nagi kept winning. In the early stages of Blue Lock, Nagi's talent alone was enough to make him one of the top players. He dominated matches and was easily the best player in his stratum. But here's the irony: Nagi's success wasn't due to any of the qualities that Blue Lock looks for. Blue Lock is designed to cultivate strikers with an overwhelming desire to win and an ego large enough to crush anything in their path. However, Nagi had neither of these traits. To truly understand this, we can look at characters like Rin and Baro, players who represent everything that Nagi does not. Rin is a player driven by an obsessive need to win so that he can surpass his older brother, while Baro is defined by his desire to be king. Both players embody the ideals of Blue Lock in ways that Nagi simply can't. In fact, I would say that Ryo acted as a crutch for Nagi, who fueled his talent and ambition, but didn't force him to create any for himself. Nagi never had to find his own motivation. He never had to develop his own ego or set a goal for himself. That is, until he faced Isagi Yoichi. Nagi's turning point comes during his match against Team Z, when for the first time, he experiences what it's like to truly want something. Up until this point, Nagi had coasted through Blue Lock without any personal ambition. But when he faces Isagi and his team, something begins to change. Despite being vastly outclassed in skill, Team Z refuses to give up. Starting the game at an 0-3 deficient, they slowly claw their way back into the match, scoring one goal at a time. With each goal, the morale surges, and Nagi starts to notice something he's never felt before. It's a strange feeling, a sense of heat emanating from Team Z's determination and drive. This heat compels Nagi to try, not because Ryo pushes him, but because for the first time, he wonders if soccer could be more than something he's just good at. Could soccer actually be fun? As Isagi relentlessly chases him down, Nagi pushes himself to his limits, executing moves he didn't even know he was capable of. He pulls off an incredible play, maneuvering past defenders, only to be fouled right before he can score. Yet, in that moment, Nagi discovers a side of himself that he never knew existed. It's a feeling they can't fully describe, but it's exhilarating. Soccer for the first time sets his heart ablaze, filling him with an intense desire to see what kind of self lies ahead. In the final confrontation with Isagi, that heat intensifies. Nagi feels like he's on the verge of something profound, something life-changing. It's as though he's about to be reborn, to finally find his true ego. But just as this feverish anticipation reaches its peak, it's all cut short when Isagi scores the winning goal. Nagi's rebirth is snatched away, and what he's left with isn't satisfaction, but frustration. Despite his talents, he had lost. But in that frustration, Nagi's journey truly begins. This loss marks the first time that Nagi feels real ambition. He doesn't fully understand it yet, but he knows that raw talent alone won't be enough to carry him to the top. But more importantly, he realizes that he doesn't just want to follow Ryo's dreams or live a life of ease. For the first time in his life, Nagi wants something for himself. He wants to beat Isagi. From here, we see Nagi take soccer much more seriously. The flashes of his own developing ego start to emerge, like when he challenges Rin in their rematch. Nagi could have chosen any opponent, but he picks the #1 ranked player in Blue Lock because he wants to face the best. He wants to test himself to see how far he can go. However, at this stage, Nagi's goals are still not fully formed. His ambition is still tied to others like being Isagi or challenging Rin. He hasn't yet discovered what he truly wants from soccer or himself. This sets up his current struggles in the Neo Egotist League, where Nagi's quest to understand his own ego continues. He ends up joining Manshine City, a team whose philosophy is to understand the mechanisms of one's body in order to achieve one's ideal self. While everyone else was able to give Chris Prince a clear idea of what their ideal self would be, Nagi was the only one unable to answer. He could only come up with a vague goal of beating Isagi. When Chris presses further, asking Nagi to explain what goes through his mind during a match, Nagi admits that he doesn't think much at all. He simply plays instinctively, relying on his natural talent. Now this confession reveals Nagi's biggest weakness. While he possesses extraordinary physical gifts, he lacks creativity and the ability to set up his own plays. He's always depending on others, whether it's Isagi feeding him perfect passes or Ryo pushing him to compete, rather than moving on his own. Recognizing this flaw, Chris tries to shift Nagi's mindset. He encourages him to play a more active style of soccer, where Nagi would take control of the field and create his own plays instead. The goal is for Nagi to break free of his passive approach and unlock his full potential. But this new approach doesn't come easily to Nagi. During their match against Bastard Muchen, Nagi faces a drastically improved Isagi. And instead of sticking to the game plan of taking initiative, Nagi reverts back to his old habits. He teams up with Ryo once again, hoping their teamwork could defeat Isagi. And in a critical moment, Nagi gets his wish, a one-on-one confrontation with Isagi. Drawing on his amazing talents, he pulls off a spectacular shot and scores on Isagi. For a brief moment, Nagi feels like he's won. He beat Isagi and achieved his goal. His value skyrockets as professional clubs begin to bet on him, drawn by the brilliance of his goal. But this success is what will eventually lead to his downfall. Ego Jinpachi, ever the realist, calls it for what it is, a fluke. He points out that while the goal was flashy, it was also unsustainable, the product of a momentary spark rather than reliable skill that Nagi could replicate. In the long run, Ego warns that this shot will have disastrous effects on Nagi. And to no one's surprise, Ego was right. Because as we see in his next matches, this moment sent Nagi spiraling. With Isagi defeated, he's left without a clear goal to strive for, and his performance starts to decline. Ryo's attempt to refocus him with the goal of securing a 300 million bid does little to inspire him. After crushing defeats to both PXG and the Ubers, Nagi finds himself questioning why he even plays soccer. He asks both Rin and Baro what drives them to keep pushing forward and what they plan to do once they achieve their goals. Baro in particular gave a harsh response. He tells Nagi that his questions are proof that he's become weak. He accuses Nagi of losing his hunger and warns him that without a stronger ego, he won't survive on the world stage. It's a brutal wake-up call for Nagi. His reliance on external motivations has left him without direction. Without a deeper internal drive, he will only continue to decline. Yet, despite feeling lost, Nagi's ego isn't completely gone. Seeing his rivals grow stronger, he comes to the realization that if he wants to keep up, he's going to need to change. This marks another turning point for Nagi, a moment where he acknowledges his flaws and begins to search for a deeper motivation. Since the story isn't complete, I can only speculate on what I think will happen next, but I think if Nagi is to rise again, then he'll need to get rid of his reliance on others and create his own path. Blue Lock has always been about building the ultimate egotist, players who don't depend on anyone else for motivation. For Nagi to become a true egotist, he must stop defining himself in relation to others and begin to shape his own vision of success. That means no more chasing after Isagi or meeting Ryo's expectations, but instead discovering an internal drive that can truly ignite his passion for soccer. And I think the catalyst that could possibly bring about this change would be if Ryo somehow left Nagi in the near future. After their recent losses, Agi tells Ryo that he and Nagi are too codependent and that if he genuinely wishes to become stronger, then he's going to need the guts to cast aside those precious to him. And I think it would be fitting for Ryo's character arc for him to eventually gain enough confidence in his own abilities to be willing to leave Nagi. And then without Ryo or Isagi to measure himself against, Nagi would be forced to look inward for the first time. He would have to search for a reason to play that goes beyond just fleeting victories. I think a poetic turn for Nagi's character would be for him to revisit his initial goal they set with Ryo, which was winning the World Cup. However, this time, it wouldn't be just something he's tagging along for. After facing his recent defeats and realizing how difficult the path really is, Nagi could come to truly understand the weight of such ambition. The experience of failure might be what sparks his first genuine desire to improve. Not because of Ryo, Isagi, or anyone else, but because he wants to. Now the last thing I want to mention is how Nagi's ego is visually represented. Most players in Blue Lock have some manifestation of their ego that symbolizes their personality and skill set. For Baro, it's a lion, for Ryo, a chameleon. However, Nagi's is a skull. A lot of fans speculate that Nagi's ego represents death and that it mirrors his playing style, just like how trapping the ball kills its momentum. But I think it's deeper than that. Throughout the series, Nagi's skull has appeared during the key moments of his growth. The most interesting moment being in chapter 191. After successfully scoring a goal against Isagi, the skull actually disappears. This suggests that Nagi's current ego has reached its limit. The skull vanishing might symbolize how shallow Nagi's motivations were, which have always been tied to others rather than being grounded in his own desires. I believe the skull vanishing is an important clue. The skull may not represent Nagi's final ego, but rather an incomplete state of his true self. Nagi's current struggles may be leading him to a moment where he can shed the surface level ego that has defined him so far. Once he finds his true purpose, we can see his skull evolve into something new, something that truly reflects who he is. And when that happens, Nagi may finally unlock his full potential and truly live up to his title of genius. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.